Invite you to join me this morning, my quiet time with the Lord. Quiet time. We have a training day today. There is a small airport not far from us, but it normally is only training, or they do problem solving with all sorts of things there. And today we might get disturbed. I've had a few noisy planes go past, so please excuse me. One coming now. How hard it is to find that quiet place in today's world. But I invite you to join me now, wherever, however, and I want to share a word with you that I found in my devotional. I hear his whisper, and he says, "Come to my feast." Many times you have thought, "Lord, if only I could have been one of the disciples who walked with you, witnessed your miracles and experienced your presence as you walked the earth. I wish I could have been on the hillside when you multiplied bread and fish and heard the words of grace and love that fell from your lips. But I say to you, I am in you, and we have become one. Come to my feast, a feast of love greater than you have ever known. I have set the table for you and am ready to host you. Drink from the cup of bliss, the cup poured out for you. Did I not promise that if you hear my voice, my gentle knock on the door of your heart, and open the door, I will come in and bring a feast? Come today and feast on my love. It's a wedding feast of the bride and the bridegroom. It will satisfy every longing in your heart. So come and let your heart be at peace. My divine fullness will be more than enough." And that is based on Ephesians 5:29 to 30. And these are the words that are written here. "No one abuses his own body, but pampers it, serving and satisfying its needs. That's exactly what Christ does for his church. He serves and satisfies us as members of his body." That didn't speak to me. I think many people abuse their bodies one way or another today. Teenagers cutting themselves. What about filling their bodies with drugs that are killing them? Or alcohol? Smoking? I've been praying for somebody whose baby should just about have been born. She lost 4 and came to me and broke down because she was pregnant again and said she couldn't do it again. She couldn't go through losing another baby, so desperately wanting a child. And as she sat with me, she was vaping. Is that what you call it? I've seen what vaping does to the lungs. I can only hope and pray that it didn't do anything to that baby. What we do to ourselves. So these words to me today did not speak. Did not speak at all. What about eating disorders? I was anorexic for many years. How is that for harming your body? And then there's the other eating disorders. No, to me these are not words for today. So I just want to open it up a little bit to its true meaning, in my opinion. Obviously you can take this to the Lord yourself. So let me give you an introduction to Ephesians. So Ephesians was written probably between 60 and 62, which would have been, let's just say, 30 years after Jesus himself was crucified. And it remembers what is called a typical rabbinic drash, a discourse. The writings, the epistles in the New Testament were mostly that. Obviously, you've got the Gospels, they were all written for a different audience. And in those days, they would have, well, in a synagogue, you would have had this kind of teaching on a regular basis. But Paul was writing to people that were far from him, so he would have written this kind of letter, and it would have been sent out to the churches to teach them something, and that is a drash, and that is how rabbis continue to teach in Judaism, and outside, of course, Messianic. So in chapters 1 to 3, Shaul, or Paul, the respected rabbi, gives Torah instruction about who God is and how to relate to him as individuals and as a collective body of Messiah. And just to reiterate, because I've said this so often, the Torah are the 5 first books of the Bible, written by Moses, about Moses, apart from after he died. Obviously somebody added to it, but those are that's the foundation of the faith. Everything you need to know will be found there, and this is continually studied all the time. It is rich with wisdom. First of all, it is a history, like in the beginning, this is what happened and God created, etc., etc. And then goes on to tell the story of a people who were chosen to be a light unto the nations and to teach them and bring more people into the community to know God, to be loved by God, to come into a covenant relationship with God. So, as I say, Paul is giving Torah instruction, so it's from those first 5 books about who God is and how to relate to him as individuals and as a collective body of Messiah. Now, it was true back then, nearly 6,000 years ago, and it is true today. It has never changed. The rest of the letter lays out halakha. Well, halakha is the law, the laws that are to be followed, the strict laws. You'll be finding them in Leviticus, repeated again in Deuteronomy, which is just, what do you call it, a rounding off, bringing it all together. So the practical ways to live according to the Torah, Shaul has just taught. Okay. So the first half of the letter of Ephesians has few, if any, direct quotes from the Torah. Many other epistles will quote directly from the Torah. When you know the Torah, you will see them in there, and of course the people that were hearing that understood immediately what the reference was and a deeper teaching. But Ephesians doesn't have so many, but there are many concepts from the Torah. In the second half of the letter, which deals more with how the community functions with God and one another, Shaul includes several important quotations basing his instructions squarely upon the Torah. I think this is very relevant for all that will be hearing this today, in the way we live in this dysfunctional world. So in 2:12, Shaul cites several problems Gentiles had, mainly because of their spiritual separation from God, their physical separation from the national life of Israel, and their resulting separation from Israel's covenants. Well, you can see this it's blatant in today's world, how Israel is under attack. They are fighting for their survival, I know that they are really respecting the laws not to take a life unless it is in defense, and they are being attacked by Gentiles around the world who criticize. Some are even coming against them, many nations. So much going on today, that's very, very clear to me. There is a separation. And of course, with this separation, they're separated from the covenants. The covenants were made with Israel right the way through. But any Gentile can be part of the covenant by choosing to come into a relationship with God through Torah, through Israel itself. There should be no separation. So the verses that follow describe how in Yeshua, Jesus, the Gentiles' problems are solved. Not only are they brought to God and the Messiah, Yeshua, but they also become fellow citizens with God's people. Now, I have been shouting that from the rooftops for many years, and believe me, there aren't many people who would align. A few, and well, they're God's treasures. I still keep shouting. And I class you as being part of that. Any that hear this today, I send it to only a few. But I've seen you, and God has seen you, more to the point. And I believe that there is no separation between us. So not only are they brought to God and the Messiah, people, Gentiles, but they also become fellow citizens with God's people. Shaul reminds believers of this reality and that this union of Jewish and Gentile believers are equals in the body of Messiah is accomplished through Yeshua. So finally, as a member of the people of Israel, Shaul welcomes the Gentiles into their midst by using familiar Torah language in 2:19. So let's have a look at 2:19 before we go any further. So then, you are no longer foreigners and strangers. On the contrary, you are fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's family. And just to read on, you have been built on the foundation of the emissaries and the prophets, with the cornerstone being Yeshua, the Messiah himself. In union with him, the whole building is held together, and it is growing into a holy temple in union with the Lord. Yes, in union with him, you yourselves are being built together into a spiritual dwelling place for God. That's the good news. So, in the Torah, those who are not native-born Israelites are called foreigners and strangers, gerim. But in Ephesians, Shaul proclaims that Jewish believers in Yeshua are to consider Gentile brothers and sisters, fellow citizens with the believing remnant of Israel. Okay, that's your foundation, just an explanation. So let's move on to the verse that was used here, but I'm going to read a little bit more because I think taken out of context, well, I know taken out of context, we can get a different message, and this truly is what I believe the message is for today. So let's start with verse 25. Hang on a minute. Well, you could look at the whole chapter actually, verse 5. So imitate God as his dear children and live a life of love, just as also the Messiah loved us. Indeed, on our behalf gave himself up as an offering, as a slaughtered sacrifice to God, with a pleasing fragrance. Among you there should not even be mentioned sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or greed. These are utterly inappropriate for God's holy people. Also, out of place are obscenity and stupid talk or coarse language. Instead, you should be giving thanks. For of this you can be sure, every sexually immoral, impure, or greedy person, that is, every idol worshipper, has no share in the kingdom of the Messiah and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty talk, for it is because of these things that God's judgment is coming on those who disobey him. So don't become partners with them. For you used to be in darkness, but now united with the Lord you are light. Live like children of light, for the fruit of the light is in every kind of goodness, rightness, and truth. Try to determine what will please the Lord. Have nothing to do with the deeds produced by darkness, but instead expose them, for it is shameful even to speak of the things these people do in secret, but everything exposed to the light is revealed clearly for what it is, since anything revealed is a light. This is why it says, "Get up, sleeper, arise from the dead, and the Messiah will shine on you." Therefore, pay careful attention to how you conduct your life. Live wisely, not unwisely. Use your time well, for these are evil days. So don't be foolish, but try to understand what the will of the Lord is. So there's the context. He's talking to people who are living in a very dysfunctional world. Probably as dysfunctional as how we are today, all of us, not talking about the people I'm talking to, but around us. And we can be part of that if we choose to be, if we're not careful. It was even worse in those days. There was much idolatry. I see idolatry today, but it is more subtle. People would be shocked if I named some of the things. Whereas back in those days, they knew full well they were worshipping idols. And there was, well, the sexual immorality was rife, as it is in our society today, whatever. So that's the context for what he was saying, you know, live a better life. You were chosen by the Messiah. You should be bearing his light. So don't get into all of the things that's going on around. In society, we need to show something different. Don't even get involved in the conversations. And then he goes on to say, verse 18, don't get drunk with wine because it makes you lose control. Instead, keep on being filled with the Spirit. Sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to each other. I'm not going to burst into song right now, but I've sent you some music. Sing to the Lord and make music in your heart to him. Always give thanks for everything to God the Father, in the name of our Lord, Yeshua, the Messiah. Submit to one another in fear of the Messiah. Fear here being awe. So then it goes on to say, wives should submit to their husbands as they do to the Lord. Oh, whoops, do I slip up on that one? But I really am trying. Because the husband is head of the wife, just as the Messiah and the Messianic community submits to the Messiah, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Please do not take anything I'm reading here as an attack on anybody. I mean, these are the guidelines. This is what Shaul is saying, and he's talking to a very different society. But what is coming to my mind as he's saying that is, I mean, you could really criticize me a lot on this one. My husband is not a believer, and it is a very difficult relationship, and I fall short so often when things are said to me and I react. Yeah, that's been a lifelong lesson. But divorce, you know, what are the reasons for divorce? Well, we could do a drash on that. You know, wrong attitudes, wrong relationships, wrong from the start, but we all are being called to be different. This is not a direct poking the finger at anybody, just what is going on and what the Lord tells us to be different. He talks about husbands. Well, this is a great one. As for husbands, love your wives, just as the Messiah loved the Messianic community, indeed gave himself up on its behalf, in order to set it apart for God, making it clean through immersion in the mikveh, so to speak. That's a ritual bath, and it's running water. There was one running through the temple. I do know that. And actually that river has been, or that stream has been uncovered some months back, 8 months maybe, something like that. There apparently a wall fell down, and so when they went to sort it out and they had to dig to get to the foundations, they found that the original mikveh ritual bath that was running at the side of the temple and was used for the ritual washing for the priests, the Levites, for anybody who chose to come and be purified. Yeah, it's amazing. It's really amazing, but that's another story. Anyway, yeah, okay. So, oh my goodness, all I'm going to say on that, if only husbands really loved their wives, what a different world we'd live in. Then wives would be able to be submissive because they weren't being treated in a way that makes them rebellious or whatever. So this again is the context. Then so all of these things in order to present the Messianic community to himself as a bride to be proud of, without a spot or a wrinkle or any such thing, but holy and without defect. I don't think any one of us can say we're holy. I certainly don't say I'm holy, but we're trying. Now we know we live under grace, and as long as we're trying, I believe Yeshua and Hashem, God the Father, are smiling on us. He knows our hearts, he knows our motives, he knows why we do things, good or bad. That's what counts. So my advice today is don't listen to words from other people that may be criticizing you, knocking you. No, focus on the word of God and what he is saying to us, because this is the way we will learn. So, husbands ought to love their wives like their own bodies, for the man who loves his wife is loving himself. Why? No one ever hated his own flesh. Here you are. These are the words that have been taken, in my opinion, out of context. On the contrary, he feeds it well and takes care of it, just as the Messiah does the Messianic community, because we are parts of his body. And the next verse, verse 31, is actually from Genesis 2:24. Therefore, a man will leave his father and mother and remain with his wife, and the two will become one. I may as well go on to the end of the chapter, which is only two more verses. There is profound truth hidden here, which I say concerns the Messiah and the Messianic community. It concerns us. However, the text also applies to each of you individually. Let each man love his wife as he does himself, and see that the wife respects her husband. Now just think about that, how the children would be different if the foundation was right. And the majority of people in this world are just not there. Again, it is not criticism, it is not attack in any way. It is a teaching. It is what I see, and how so many verses can be taken out of context and misunderstood. So again, just to round up, just to recap on this whole chapter. Look at Yeshua. Look at Jesus. He is our role model. Look at the way he was with other people. he was humble, he was kind, he was gentle. Yes, he could be angry. Oh, he could be angry. But he tried very hard to be understanding, compassionate and loving. And don't forget, Paul also says elsewhere, the greatest of all things is love. That's a little teaching from me as a Jewish Christian, Christian Jew, Messianic Jew, call me what you like. I am just me. I love the Lord, and this is what Judaism will teach. The greatest of all things is love. We need to actually love ourselves. I find that very hard, because when we love ourselves, we can love others. But actually we can't do any of these things unless we clothe ourselves in the love of our God. I say shalom to you today with many blessings.